I'm Richard Vobes, the bald explorer, and I'm out on the trail of the Thakeham ghost. Sarah Penny committed suicide many hundreds of years ago here in Thakeham. I'm out in West Sussex on this beautiful crisp early morning. It's about -6 as I record this. Sarah Penny was a woman who had lost her child and was absolutely devastated. She could cope no more and she committed suicide. Suicide, in the eyes of religious people back then, was seen as a terrible thing. It was not your place to take a life. God gave you life, you couldn't take it yourself. And so therefore, if you committed suicide, you weren't permitted to be buried in consecrated ground. As a result, people would take these people who had taken their own life and bury them at crossroads. The significance of that was that their soul would be permanently unsure which road to take and would be destined to stay there forever. Thomas Miles was a dairy farmer. He had about 10 cattle and he'd recently moved to the area here at Thakeham. As a tenant farmer, he was given a house and some land in which to look after these cattle. He supplied the landed gentry and the local villagers with milk, while his wife made cheese to sell in the market. One dark night, we don't know when, it's brought to his attention that the gate to one of his fields has been left open and his cows subsequently have got out. He can't afford to lose them. He has 10 great milkers and they are his livelihood. But there are ditches in the area, and if a cow gets stuck in a ditch, it can be useless and can die. So Thomas Mills gets to his feet. He grabs hold of a lantern and ventures out into the night. There are many places that the cattle can go. They can wander down the lane, they can cross over from field to field. It's a wide area to search. And Thomas Miles does his best to round up what he can, but there's still one missing. The hours roll on and Thomas Mills still hasn't found this last cow, though he can hear it. A forlorn mooing in the distance is there, so he knows he's got to press on. However, he is forced to come up this lane, and halfway up this lane is a crossroads, the crossroads that Sarah Penny had been buried. Now, in the daytime this didn't worry anybody, but at night it was a terrifying place, for it was said that the ghost of Sarah Penny would loom up at you with a lantern and flash it in your face. So this is the crossroads. This is the haunted crossroads. If I continue north, you go to West Chiltington. If I go west, it'll be that way towards, I guess, Amberley. I can go back towards, more directly to Thakeham that way, and that's south down to the South Downs. But it is here that the ghost of Sarah Penny is supposed to haunt. Thomas Mills cautiously approaches the crossroads. He's nervous because he thinks he can see a figure, and he can. And at first he thinks it must be a local, a labourer or someone, and perhaps they've seen the cow. But as he looks a bit more intently, he realises it is a woman. She seems to be sitting on a stool and she's sobbing. As he approaches, she suddenly rises up and pulls up her lantern, waving it in his face. He's startled by the brightness of the light and stands back. She seems to be telling him to go back, but he's frozen to the spot for a moment as she swings the lantern from left to right across him. Go back, she says. He staggers backwards and moves further down the lane, pausing to look at her one more time And it's at that moment that she disappears. He rushes away, unsure what to do, for the woman has spooked him, but he still hears the forlorn sound of his cow, and so he decides he'll have to circumvent the crossroads. He cuts through a hedge and makes his way around to head her off and get back on the path of the cow. It's been a long night, and he searches in vain for this cow, and eventually he can no longer hear the mournful mooing of this cow, so Thomas Mills decides to return home. He is exhausted, but rather than go to the crossroads and possibly come across this strange apparition again, he goes a completely different way, and en route he comes across an alehouse that is still open. Deciding to warm himself by the fire and maybe have a small beverage to sustain him, he goes in and sits down, warming his cold hands. Just then, 2 labourers come in to the alehouse. They look frightened and nervous, and they're chattering 10 to the dozen. The landlord calms them down. "What is the matter?" he says. They say, "We've seen her. We've seen the lady with the lamp at the crossroads. We've seen her." Thomas Mills looks up. He realises that they too have obviously seen the same person. She was there with the lantern, waving it, telling us to go back, to go back. Just then the door is flung open and another labourer comes in. But this time he is more agitated than the others, and he's calling for help. "Come, quickly, everyone, come, help! The Mills place is on fire. The dairy is ablaze." Thomas Mills is to his feet immediately. "My house," he says, thinking of his wife and daughter. "Yes, the dairy, it is on fire." Those timber-framed buildings are terrible. They go up in smoke so quickly, and the community pull together whenever there's such a terrible catastrophe. The men poured out of the alehouse. They thunder down the road, and then they start to falter. "Come on, what's the matter?" They realise they are approaching the crossroads where the apparition had been seen. "Don't worry about that. My house, my wife, my daughter are in there. Come on, we must do something." But the men start to worry. They daren't cross the crossroads. "You must help me," pleads Thomas Mills. "No, we cannot." "Then go round through the hedges." They are too nervous and shaky. They will not help anymore. Thomas Mills, determined, grits his teeth and rushes forward and crosses the crossroads. There is no apparition, there is no ghost, there is no lantern, and he belts towards the red light in the sky, his burning dairy. He rushes to the house in the field where the dairy is, and there it is, a mass of burning flame. "Elizabeth!" he calls. "Elizabeth!" There is no sign of his wife nor his daughter. "Elizabeth!" He walks up as close as he can get to the burning building, but it is a wrench of fire. The heat is too much. He's looking desperately to see if there's any sign at the windows, but there is not. He cannot go in. He runs around the house, calling, "Elizabeth! Elizabeth!" He realises at last that all is lost. There is nothing more he can do. She must have perished. He watches the fire as it engulfs the whole of the property, and he falls to his bended knees, his head hitting the ground, and he weeps, and he weeps. When morning comes, he finds himself in the same position, head in the dirt. But he is roused by the sound of a voice calling his name. He looks up, and there, running across the field, is his wife, Elizabeth, and she carries his daughter in her arms. "You're not dead. You haven't perished," he says in amazement. Yes, it is amazing. They clasp and they hold each other. And he says, thank God you got out. What happened? She said, I was tending the baby. I must have fallen asleep, and the lantern that I had in my hand must have fallen on the ground and set light to the building. I would have slept through it, for the baby was not going to sleep and I was exhausted. And yet this woman roused me from my slumber. This woman told me to get out of the house before it was too late. Get your baby and go, she said. I grabbed hold of our daughter and I staggered out of the house just in time before the beams collapsed and the place went up in blazes. But when I looked, the woman who roused me, I couldn't find her. I couldn't see her. She wasn't there. She must have perished in the fire. Thomas Mills knows exactly who the woman was, and he tells his wife not to worry. They lived on, as far as we know, happily ever after. I hope you've enjoyed this tale. Thank you so much for watching. Why not subscribe, follow, like, make a comment, or even become a patron and help support me put petrol in the car and travel around and make these films. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.